I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending July the 17th, where if you remember we come into this last week on a real bearish note. The board had been down real hard and didn't seem to show any support. Box beef prices plummeted last week following the 4th of July holiday there. And it just really looked like we were down in the dumps and going nowhere, except for cash cattle prices, and cash cattle prices were not much weaker at all. We sold fed cattle about steady, and feeder cattle didn't lose any ground and actually sold a little higher where they were offered at specials and places like that. It's just all the indicators that's around the feeder cattle are really pressuring hard on it. But then we got into last weekend and moved into this week, and it was so hot and that oppressive heat and high humidity there in Nebraska especially, just really more than cattle could take when the air is not moving at all, and had some pretty significant losses in some feedlots in the northern plains, several hundred in individual feedlots themselves, and then a lot of losses on some trucks headed to packing plants of market-ready cattle and things like that, which really makes it hard for guys, and they just as soon take less for cattle than to have them lose them, especially market-ready cattle. But the guys pretty much stuck in there this week. Auction feeder cattle were $2 to $5 lower, and we knew that they would be some lower. We're getting into the dog days of summer. Direct trade was not that much lower, maybe steady to maybe $2 or $3 in some places, and in other places might have been a little stronger. It's just as these feedlot guys are just running around in the country trying to get up some of these green yearlings, get them secured for later summer and early fall delivery, because they're the best feeder cattle of the year as far as feedlot performance, and guys are really wanting those cattle. And it's just that the feeder cattle futures are just trailing, for August contract is just trailing so far behind what cattle are actually bringing that it is pulling down on it some, but for the most part guys are just kind of throwing a blind eye to it. Not that much activity going on in the futures market anyway. Live cattle this past week posted the lowest open interest at one point in more than 5 years. So just not getting any outside interest into these ag commodities, especially on cattle. But look at some prices on some feeder cattle this week. Gordon, Nebraska, you look on Cattle Market Central, it's the only place that gets reported on Cattle Market Central, and you'll see a load of 739 pound steers bring 237 and a quarter. That's just about what the board's based upon, is 750 pound steer. That's awful close, and those cattle bring over a $20 premium. Go a little bit heavier, and you see in Salina, Kansas, had 2 loads of steers, weighed 866 at 217.75 there on Cattle Market Central. And then that's a good price too. And then we get a little bit heavier yet. We saw a string of cattle out in the private treaty sales, just out in the country, direct trade, had a string like 6,000 of them, weighing 990 pounds, bring 213, and that's for late August delivery. All these prices are pretty good, but you see how rapidly they taper off as these cattle get heavier. And we see that out in the country, and these guys are writing contracts. They've really cranked up the slide on these cattle. They're setting the slide the same places, but where we used to see a nickel or a 7-cent slide, they're really jumping that up a whole lot faster to try to scale that price down in case whenever they get to delivery, those cattle are a whole lot heavier than what they are, and the buyers don't want to take a chance on having to give way too much for cattle that come in heavier than what they're supposed to, especially as good as the grass has been around. But calf sales have been slow. Just don't see any calves selling this time of year. The southeast sold them from 5 lower to 5 higher, and just not a whole lot of activity. If you go away from there, you just see some odd bunches of weekend warriors, people that don't really keep up with the market. Otherwise, why would they bring just a handful of calves in? Most calves are happy out there with their mothers. They won't be weaned till later on this fall, and really no need to move them, as we have ample pasture in almost every area except for the out west. And talking about out west, we see the fall delivery calves. The demand's going to be good for them already on Superior there last Friday. Didn't get that information really till this week out in Oakley, Idaho, and that's out there where it's terrible dry. but we saw 240 head of weaned steer calves for late November delivery bring 405, weighing 410 pounds. And those cattle are crossed up cattle, no bells and whistles. There's not really any big premium to gain on those cattle other than they're good weaned steer calves, and guys want them for background in this winter. But your fat cattle this week sold $2 to $3 lower, which we knew they were going to be lower, about had to be. 148 to 148.50 on a live basis, $4 lower dressed at 236, and Chicago must have thought it was going to be worse than that, because we did see some support on the board after that happened on Friday afternoon. Your box beef cutout values have kind of slowed the sell off there. They're still a little bit lower every time, but not as much. And this Wednesday we saw the biggest single daily trade that we've seen in nearly a year there. So they are these end users are coming in there and buying up a lot of this product at the lower prices, and we're seeing a lot of support in there in the 230s, and that's about where we are right now. So should level off right now, and then these packers aren't going to let them buy a whole lot of product this cheap. Dressed steer weights have really gone up, so I guess we've got through most of these calf feds that the packers really don't like, and we're causing a discount in the northern feedlot area because we see in the last actual data, which was for the weekend in July the 4th, that dressed steer weights were at 875 pounds, and that was 11 pounds heavier than just less than a month before that. But that pretty much wraps up your cattle market summary for this week. Check out DV Auction for all of our regular weekly auctions, and in the next week or two we're going to be selling sheep and goats and horses and hay and land and just about everything you can think of. Get on there and check out the production sales. You can also see this report on the stockexchangenews.com. So from my home DV Auction office here near Maysville, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.